and my eyes see another awkward and confusing Best Picture winner announcement. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the results of yesterday's 96th Academy Awards and comparing the actual winners to my picks and predictions. If you haven't already watched my Oscar prediction video, you could check it out here to see not only my personal picks and predictions for all 23 categories, but also my reasoning for those predictions. You can also check out my Oscar category ranking series to see my full rankings of the nominees for all 23 categories. In this video, we're going to go through all 23 of those categories, and for each, I'm going to tell you the nominees, remind you of my personal pick, recap who I thought would win, and then briefly talk about the actual winner. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. Remember, these are just my thoughts, so be sure to post your own personal thoughts on the 2024 Oscars in the comments below. I've already reviewed some of these movies on this channel, so if you want to check those out for some more in-depth thoughts on each of them, I'll put links in the description below, and also link some of them up in the cards as we go along. I'll be going through these in the order in which they were actually presented, but I'll put timestamps in the description to make it a bit easier to navigate. Alright, let's talk about these results. Actress in a supporting role. The nominees were Emily Blunt in Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks in The Color Purple, America Ferrera in Barbie, Jodie Foster in Nyad, and Da'Vine Joy Randolph in The Holdovers. My personal pick was Da'Vine Joy Randolph, and I also thought she would actually win. And the Oscar went to Da'Vine Joy Randolph in The Holdovers. I mentioned it in my predictions video, but I really think this was the category and the pick I was most excited for and passionate about this year. So it was kind of weird to have that be over so quickly as the very first category, but whew, definitely a super deserved win here. She really tied this ensemble together, imbuing the film with a lot of emotion and melancholy, while still serving as this powerful bedrock for the story. If The Holdovers was only going to come away with one Oscar tonight, this is the one I hoped it would win. Animated short film. The nominees were Letter to a Pig, 95 Senses, Our Uniform, Pachyderm, and War is Over, inspired by the music of John and Yoko. My personal pick was War is Over, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to War is Over. You know, it's funny. Leading up to the Oscars, I was really going back and forth between War is Over and 95 Senses. Not only for my prediction, but also for my personal pick. But unlike so many other categories where I was second-guessing myself last night, I was surprisingly stress-free when it came to this one for some reason. This short is incredibly heavy-handed with its messaging, and the inclusion of the titular song is expected, but eye-rolling nonetheless. However, I still contend that it was a strong nominee. I'm sure 95 Senses was a close second, but the simplicity and thematic components of this one just felt like they'd be Oscar-winning, especially among the older voting body. Animated feature film. The nominees were The Boy and the Heron, Elemental, Nimona, Robot Dreams, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. My personal pick was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to The Boy and the Heron. So this was the first surprise of the night. I say that loosely, because I did think The Boy and the Heron had a bit of an outside chance of winning here, but still a surprise. I'm not sure if this category technically qualifies as an upset, but it's pretty close. Somehow, over a nearly 4.5-decade-long career, this is only Miyazaki's second Oscar win, coming 22 years after Spirited Away earned him the same award. This is supposedly, or at least currently, his final film, so it does feel like a fitting way to end a career. Original screenplay. The nominees were Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Maestro, May December, and Past Lives. My personal pick was Past Lives, but I thought Anatomy of a Fall would actually win. And the Oscar went to Anatomy of a Fall. Alright, so we're back to another category that I'm very happy with here. Yes, my personal pick and my favorite movie and screenplay of the year did not win, but like I said in the predictions video, I was going to be happy if Past Lives, The Holdovers, or Anatomy of a Fall won, because they were all great in very different ways. Anatomy of a Fall is a gripping and layered story that's both a really interesting courtroom drama and a really compelling character and family study. The more layers that are peeled back here in search of the truth, the more uncertain it all becomes. Just a really well-written film all around, so I'm glad it won. And I'm maybe even more glad that the canine star of the film, Messi, was able to attend the ceremony. Adapted screenplay. The nominees were American Fiction, Barbie, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. My personal pick was Oppenheimer, but I thought American Fiction would actually win. And the Oscar went to American Fiction. I'll admit that this wasn't originally gonna be my pick. I like the film and the screenplay, but this was one of those ones that I was initially kind of surprised even got a nomination in the category. I was all set to go with Oppenheimer here for my prediction, but the momentum and other awards ceremony wins were really in American Fiction's favor heading into last night. So I made the last minute change, and it worked out in my favor. Cord Jefferson gave a great speech, though, about film budgets and filmmaking opportunities, so hopefully studios take his suggestions under consideration. Makeup and hairstyling. The nominees were Golda, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and Society of the Snow. My personal pick was Society of the Snow, but I thought Maestro would actually win, and the Oscar went to Poor Things. So I hit a little bit of a rough patch this year with some of these technical categories, starting with this one. I knew Poor Things had a shot here, but for some reason, it really seemed like it was going to be a distant second. I am certainly not a fan of Maestro, but I thought for sure that this is where it was going to be seeing some Oscar love. Instead, it went home completely empty-handed, and Poor Things nabbed its first of many Oscars for the night. There was a lot going on with hair and makeup in this film, and I'm sure it all factored into the decision, but it seems like the makeup for Willem Dafoe specifically was the major contributor to this. Not only being focused on during the film's category introduction video, but also being individually acknowledged during the acceptance speech. Production design. The nominees were Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. My personal pick was Barbie, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to Poor Things. Another technical category, another Poor Things win. Unlike the previous category, this is one that I really thought could go to Barbie just as easily as it could go to Poor Things. It felt like a toss-up, and I'm sure it was closer than usual in this category, but Poor Things' off-kilter steampunk aesthetic earned it a win, and I really can't say I'm that surprised. Costume design. The nominees were Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. My personal pick was Barbie, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to Poor Things. Told you I hit a rough patch, all thanks to Poor Things. Just like with production design, I thought this could go either way, between Barbie and Poor Things. And I figured whichever film was gonna win would end up winning both categories. And that's exactly what happened. Once again, the quirky, off-kilter creativity and weirdness of Poor Things spoke to the voters, and it came out on top over the toys-come-to-life stylings of Barbie. Obviously not the winner I would have chosen, but I can't say I'm surprised or that I'm upset, because it was still my second choice and a deserved win. Plus, this was one of the more entertaining of the awards presentations during the night, thanks to John Cena's costume-free introduction. International Feature Film. The nominees were Io Capitano, Perfect Days, Society of the Snow, The Teacher's Lounge, and The Zone of Interest. My personal pick was Society of the Snow, but I thought The Zone of Interest would actually win, and the Oscar went to The Zone of Interest. Okay, we're out of the rough patch for a while here, but it makes sense, because this category was basically a given. It's strange, but for the last several years, this hasn't been a super competitive category, so it's not the most exciting to watch on Oscar night, because it feels almost predetermined. So, as expected, the Best Picture nominee took home the Oscar, and even though it wasn't my favorite in the category, this was still a very good film. As a haunting exercise in dichotomy, it presented a seemingly idyllic life as an island within an ocean of unseen, but frequently heard horrors. It had some impactful sound design, and was a chilling examination of the mundanity of evil, and the consequences of such apathy. Actor in a supporting role. The nominees were Sterling K. Brown in American Fiction, Robert De Niro in Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. in Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling in Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo in Poor Things. My personal pick was Robert Downey Jr., and I also thought he would actually win. And the Oscar went to Robert Downey Jr. in Oppenheimer. It's crazy that we finally get to say Oscar winner Robert Downey Jr. This wasn't a particularly surprising win, since all the momentum was in his favor coming into the night, but it's still always exciting to see somebody get their first Oscar. This was a strong set of nominees this year, and I also really like Ryan Gosling as Ken, but Downey Jr. was a powerful driving force in Oppenheimer, with his strong dramatic turn as Louis Strauss. Visual effects. The nominees were The Creator, Godzilla Minus One, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, and Napoleon. My personal pick was Godzilla Minus One, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to Godzilla Minus One. This was one of the more exciting categories of the night, because it didn't feel like a foregone conclusion coming into the ceremony. Ironically, a complete reversal when compared to Avatar's win last year. It seemed like things were starting to lean towards The Creator, and many of the anonymous ballots supported that, but I'm so happy that Godzilla got it. Not only do I think it was deserving, delivering probably my favorite Godzilla design and some intense sci-fi action effects, but the Godzilla team seemed to be the most excited winners of all last night. With their awesome Godzilla shoes and their mini Godzilla figures, they came prepared. It's just too bad the Academy wasn't. They really need to provide interpreters. Forcing people to deliver their acceptance speeches in English is bad enough, but then playing them off as they try to honor a dead colleague in a language they don't speak wasn't a good look for the Academy. They really should have an on-stage interpreter, or even better, a setup like the UN, so everybody in the audience can understand every speech. Film editing. The nominees were Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. My personal pick was Oppenheimer, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to Oppenheimer. Well, we've switched back to the foregone conclusion categories here. I would have been just as happy with a win by Anatomy of a Fall or The Holdovers, but the editing in Oppenheimer was one of its many keys to success. This was a non-linear, decade-spanning story, but the editing really helped to keep the story incredibly tense, while also making it simple enough to follow. As a quick note on the presentation itself, I think this might have been my favorite setup, apart from the acting categories with their past nominees. The film strip design on the stage with the images from each movie was just really cool to me. Documentary short subject. The nominees were The ABCs of Book Banning, The Barber of Little Rock, Island in Between, The Last Repair Shop, and Nai and WIPO. My personal pick was The Last Repair Shop, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to The Last Repair Shop. As enjoyable as it would have been to see Nai and WIPO on stage accepting an Oscar with their grandson, The Last Repair Shop was the clear standout in the category to me, and I'm happy that the voters agreed. It was a really well-constructed short, telling a very positive and uplifting story about the impact of music. Definitely the highlight of this presentation was the fact that the violin girl from the film, Portia, was not only in attendance, but also joined the directors on stage for the acceptance. Documentary feature. The nominees were Bobby Wine, The People's President, The Eternal Memory, Four Daughters, To Kill a Tiger, and 20 Days in Mariupol. My personal pick was 20 Days in Mariupol, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to 20 Days in Mariupol. There were some good films in this category, but at least in my mind, there was no way anybody was going to beat this one. Such a hard watch. Such an impactful film. I know we've had a lot of war documentaries over the years, and many have won the Oscar, but man, this one's haunting and deeply emotional and infuriating. Plus, the director gave one of the stronger and more impassioned speeches of the night. Cinematography. The nominees were El Conde, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. My personal pick was Oppenheimer, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to Oppenheimer. I'll admit that the stretch of tech category wins for Poor Things earlier in the night had me a little nervous in the moment here, but this was another category that really couldn't have gone to anybody besides Oppenheimer. Just like with the film editing category, the cinematography was essential to telling this decade-spanning non-linear story, so it was definitely a deserved win. Live action short film. The nominees were The After, Invincible, Night of Fortune, Red, White, and Blue, and The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. My personal pick was Night of Fortune, but I thought The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar would actually win. And the Oscar went to The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. Wes Anderson finally wins an Oscar, and he's not even there to accept it. So I feel like this category probably wasn't much of a surprise to anybody. It's funny, in one of my other videos about the shorts this year, somebody had commented saying that it almost feels like cheating having a Wes Anderson film in the category, and I can agree with the sentiment. He's at such a different level, and has a style that's so recognizable that it's hard to compete. It's kind of like when Disney or Pixar submit animated shorts. They don't always win, but they usually do. That said, I can still definitely understand why Henry Sugar won. Great cast, great production design, expectedly quirky delivery. It's a good one and was deserving. Sound. The nominees were The Creator, Maestro, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, Oppenheimer, and The Zone of Interest. My personal pick was Oppenheimer, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to The Zone of Interest. So this is a category whose outcome was both surprising and not surprising at the same time. Even though it had lost some of the other big awards for the category, Oppenheimer seemed to be gaining traction coming into this, especially with wins in many critics' guilds. And it was a really strong contender, delivering on both the sound editing and sound design aspects of this now combined sound category. But I can certainly understand why The Zone of Interest won. While Oppenheimer had a lot of other things contributing to its success, The Zone of Interest was very sound dependent, with its impact hinging on the dichotomy between the horrifying things we hear beyond the wall and the mundane things we actually see within the walls. This sound design was easily its most impressive feature, so it's an understandable and deserved win. Original score. The nominees were American Fiction, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. My personal pick was Oppenheimer, and I also thought it would actually win. And the Oscar went to Oppenheimer. So we've got another unsurprising Oppenheimer win here. I actually liked all of the score nominees this year, even though I would have still substituted a few with some that weren't nominated. But Ludwig Göransson's score was really strong here. It might not be an everyday listen kind of score, but in the context of the film, it's phenomenal, with its relentless tension-building nature. Original song. The nominees were The Fire Inside from Flamin' Hot, I'm Just Ken from Barbie, It Never Went Away from American Symphony, Wazazi, A Song for My People from Killers of the Flower Moon, and What Was I Made For from Barbie. My personal pick was I'm Just Ken, but I thought What Was I Made For would actually win. And the Oscar went to What Was I Made For from Barbie. Well, we've got a history-making win here. Billie Eilish and her brother Phineas are now the youngest and second youngest people to win 2 Oscars in any category, after having previously won Best Original Song for No Time to Die at the 94th Academy Awards. So this year's win wasn't particularly surprising, though it's potentially a bit unexpected that it was the only win for Barbie. But this was basically a guaranteed Barbie win, much to Diane Warren's chagrin, I'm sure. 15 nominations and no wins for that woman. I'm hoping one of these years for her. I'm Just Ken was not enough to come away with the Oscar last night, but it did provide arguably the most entertaining part of the night, with a big production and rousingly fun performance by Ryan Gosling. Actor in a leading role. The nominees were Bradley Cooper in Maestro, Coleman Domingo in Rustin, Paul Giamatti in The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer, and Jeffrey Wright in American Fiction. My personal pick was Paul Giamatti, but I thought Cillian Murphy would actually win. And the Oscar went to Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer. Another Oppenheimer non-surprise, but another satisfying and exciting win nonetheless. Just like with the previous 2 acting categories, we've got another first-time Oscar winner with Cillian Murphy. I mean, I really loved Paul Giamatti's performance and would have been happy to see him win instead, but these 2 performances were just about tied for me, so I'm just as happy for a Murphy win. And man, was this a deserved win. He had such depth to his performance here, really able to convey how haunted Oppenheimer was, both professionally and personally. Directing. The nominees were Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, and Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. My personal pick was Christopher Nolan, and I also thought he would actually win. And the Oscar went to Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer. Another unsurprising win for Oppenheimer here, but surprisingly, we've got another first-time Oscar winner. It's hard to believe that Nolan had never won before. Not for Best Picture, not for directing, not for writing. He's made so many fantastic movies, and had been nominated a number of times before, but for his layered and deliberately crafted cohesive work in Oppenheimer, he was finally rewarded and able to hold up that statuette for the first time. So even though it kind of felt like a foregone conclusion, and wasn't the most exhilarating or edge-of-your-seat announcement, it was still a very well-deserved win. Actress in a leading role. The nominees were Annette Bening in Nyad, Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Uhler in Anatomy of a Fall, Carey Mulligan in Maestro, and Emma Stone in Poor Things. My personal pick was Sandra Uhler, but I thought Lily Gladstone would actually win. And the Oscar went to Emma Stone in Poor Things. So along with The Boy and the Heron, this was probably the other category that broke up a lot of people's perfect predictions. I mean, Emma Stone's face said it better than probably anybody could, but this was a bit of a shocking win. Not because she wasn't deserving of it. She was great in that movie, and was my favorite aspect of it. I mean, she was my second favorite of the nominees after Sandra Uhler. But man, everything had been really pointing to Lily Gladstone for the win here. So this was surprising and possibly the biggest upset of the night, even though they were both the two frontrunners. Best Picture. The nominees were American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. My personal pick was Past Lives, but I thought Oppenheimer would actually win. And my eyes see Oppenheimer. No upset here, but definitely a strange presentation of the award by Al Pacino. It's currently unclear whether he was drunk, having some sort of medical issue, or just old, but he provided one of the more memorably confusing and anticlimactic Best Picture announcements we've ever had. He didn't even read the list of nominees, so when he mumbled "My eyes see Oppenheimer," a Pacino quote that's bound to join the ranks of "Say Hello to My Little Friend," the crowd was visibly confused. Anyway, after never having won an Oscar for more than 20 years, Christopher Nolan gets his second Oscar in 20 minutes. Obviously, I'm sad that my favorite film of the year didn't win in either of its categories, but especially for Best Picture, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, Oppenheimer's the type of movie that you just can't compete with, especially on the broadest scale and biggest stage like this. This was certainly the year of Oppenheimer, and it proved it by taking home 7 Oscars. Alright, so there you have it, my reaction to the results of the 96th Academy Awards. I correctly predicted 17 out of 23 winners, and 12 of my 23 personal picks actually won. Usually the combined total gives me a bit of a boost, but just like last year, all of my correct personal picks were also the ones I predicted to win. So I correctly picked or predicted a combined 17 of 23. So this was another pretty decent year for me for predictions, though my personal picks saw a slight drop. Compared to last year, I had exactly the same number of correct predictions, 17, which ties my record from last year. And like I mentioned, I did slightly worse with my personal picks, getting 12 compared to last year's 13, with my combo picks staying the same at 17 for the 3rd year running. So almost exactly the same stats as last year for me, oddly enough. So how did you do with your predictions? I'd love to see your thoughts on the Oscar results and also your prediction percentage, so be sure to post them in the comments below. Remember, I've already ranked all of the nominees from all 23 categories, and I've also reviewed some of these movies, so I've put links to those videos in the description below, and you can check those out if you want some more in-depth discussion of each, as well as my ratings, pros and cons, and even tailored film recommendations. And if you're interested in buying any of these Oscar-nominated and winning movies, I do have affiliate links to all of them in the description below. I do get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe if you're at it to see more videos like this, as well as movie reviews. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.